Hi there. This one is dedicated to my friends and family who served in the United States Army, where they got to eat a dish that's become famous for the name the soldiers gave it. We call it hamburger gravy, but you probably know it from what they called it, namely shit on a shingle. Out of curiosity, I researched and found an actual World War II recipe for diced meat in gravy, aka SOS, and I can only wonder if the US Army required the recipe to sound as disgusting as possible when they published it. I did make some modifications to this recipe to make it a little more tasty than what they serve in the Army, and well, it may still look like a pile of SOS, but I doubt anyone would turn away after tasting this themselves. The first step is to heat a cast iron skillet on your stovetop. I've been told by Army veterans that they do indeed use dried beef in this dish, at least whenever they can. After slicing the beef, we then chop up an onion and we're ready to begin cooking. We start by frying the onions until they're tender, and then we prepare a roux with half a stick of butter and half a cup of flour. We saute the onions in the butter until the butter is completely melted, then add the flour. We simply mix it all together, then we add 2 cups of milk, a little at a time, to make our gravy. Of course, it's absolutely necessary to use a cast iron skillet for preparing this because it heats the gravy and makes it good and thick as well as more tasty. Once the gravy is good and thick, we add flavor by mixing in lots of black pepper and some Worcestershire sauce. We don't have to add any salt to this because the dried beef is very salty on its own. Fortunately, the gravy absorbs the salt from the beef and spreads it around. If the gravy gets too thick, just add a little more milk to thin it out. And that's all there is to it. We serve the gravy on toast, and we have a fast breakfast ready to be served to some hungry troops or even to your own family. Of course, making this at home means we can add our own ingredients and use some variety. For instance, here we'll be serving this on mashed potatoes rather than toast, and that simply requires boiling the potatoes while we prepare the gravy. As before, we heat up a large cast iron skillet and chop up an onion. For a pound of hamburger, you should use a 12-inch skillet if you have one. A 10-inch pan will work okay, but the larger pan gives more room to stir the beef and thoroughly cook it. We cook the ground beef until it's no longer pink, then we add the onions and cook it all until the onions are tender. You can also add your own spices to flavor the beef, such as garlic or barbecue sauce or whatever you like. From here, once again, we make our roux with half a stick of butter and half a cup of flour. When the butter is melted, we add the flour a little at a time and stir it all together to incorporate it. This will make it all nice and thick, and we then add our milk, a cup at a time, and stir it together to make the gravy. It only takes a couple of minutes for the gravy to become good and thick. We flavor it with ground pepper and Worcestershire sauce, though you can add your own spices if you want. Add extra milk to bring it to the right consistency, and for a little sweetness, we also mix in a can of peas. If anything, this dish looks even less appealing than the Army version. This doesn't keep it from tasting good, of course. And the potatoes are ready to be mashed. We don't get to do this in the Army. We add some butter, milk, pepper, and basil to the potatoes. Then we mash it all together. This is why I enjoy making homemade mashed potatoes rather than using the packaged stuff, and it's also a lot less expensive. Now we top our mashed potatoes with the gravy, and we can let the kids make lots of comments about how disgusting it looks. By the way, telling the kids in advance that it looks gross will usually make them even more likely to actually eat it. Whether you call this mashed potatoes and gravy, or meat and gravy on toast, or shit on a shingle, one thing we can definitely say, it tastes a lot better than it looks, and that's why it's part of many a breakfast table and dinner table all over the country. And besides, 2 million U.S. Army soldiers can't be wrong, can they? Given a choice between eating this and an MRE, I'm sure you know what most of them would choose. And since you've probably eaten this dish already, please post your comments below and tell us your stories. And above all, have fun making this dish and carrying the tradition to another generation of breakfast and probably many more to come. Thank you for watching.